Free agents can be really useful to get in Football Manager. They can save you millions in transfer fees, and if they do well, you could sell them on for a tiny bit of profit. In my stream save with Lincoln City, link down in the description, I tried really hard to sign Fabio Martin to the club. He didn't sign, he went to Sydney FC instead, but I really tried hard. So today I thought I'd help you guys out by building a full 11 of really good free agents that I think would do a decent job for your team. Also, one of these players I really think could actually be a wonder kid, so make sure you stick around to find out which player that is. We're going to start off with the goalkeeper, and it's 23-year-old Javier Bellman, who actually looks pretty good in the goalkeeping and mental areas. The physicals might let him down a little bit, and that's probably why he was let go by Real Madrid and then also Fuenlabrada after getting only 5 appearances in the second division in Spain. But the thing is, he's only 23 years old, and goalkeepers do keep developing until their mid to late 20s, so actually I think you could get a pretty decent keeper out of this guy. Maybe not quite a Champions League winner, but I think could easily become a decent keeper in one of the top 5 leagues in Europe. In right back, we've got Santiago Arias, who has been let go from Atletico Madrid, but still, I reckon, could do a very good job. 54 caps for Colombia is not bad, and those physicals at 30 years old are still absolutely insane. Decent crossing and decent dribbling. The tackling is pretty average as well. He's obviously a very good player for, you know what, I'm going to say it. I think he would still do a good job in the top 5 leagues in Europe. At 30 years old, he's still at the peak of his career. He's got a few years until he starts to decline in attributes. So for a team that is newly promoted or looking for promotion to the top flight, I reckon he'd be a really good pickup if you can afford it. For the first of the 2 centre-backs, we're going to go for Serbian Sava Šeštic. And he actually looks pretty decent. 21 years old with 2 caps for Serbia. Now, the technicals maybe don't look too great, but where they are fundamentally important, such as heading, tackling and marking, they're very, very good. And of course, being 21 years old, they can still improve. The mentals could be a little bit low, but of course, he's only 21 years old. They will get better as he develops as a player. Pace and acceleration of 9 and 11, that's where I get a little bit worried with him. But again, he's young, raw, you can develop him, and he's got some pretty decent strength and jumping reach. And 192 centimetres is going to win a lot of headers from near post corners. Has had an interesting career so far, being at Eintracht Frankfurt, Schalke, Cologne, and recently being let go of Rijeka over in Croatia, but I think would be a pretty good pickup. Now, for the other centre-back, and going in the complete opposite direction with age, we've got 31-year-old Mateo Musakio, who's an Argentine centre-back with 6 caps for his country. Now we'll start off with the downsides very quickly. The height only 180 centimetres and jumping reach only 12. It could be a little bit better. He's not going to be the man winning all of those near post corners for you. However, the positives, there are a lot of them. For a starter, perfectionist personality would be a really good shooter for your young defenders. The rest of his physicals aren't actually that bad. They're pretty decent. The mentals are really, really good, particularly things like bravery, aggression, work rate, and teamwork. Really like those. And he's a very good ball playing defender. 14 heading, 15 marking, 13 passing, and 15 tackling. Add in 12 technique in there as well. He's very good on the ball. Has just been let go of Lazio. Surprised they've let him go considering he's a pretty decent centre-back. Perhaps in real life he's just not as good as maybe he is in Football Manager, but would still be a really solid pickup for a top-tier team. He also played quite a lot of his career for AC Milan in Serie A, and he can watch the Serie A live on the One Football app for absolutely free. This weekend, Inter Milan as they take on Sampdoria. All you have to do is search up Serie A, look for the Inter vs Sampdoria game in game week 12, then just click the watch tab on there and the game will be available when it's live. You can download the app for absolutely free from the top line of the description, and doing so really helps me and the channel out. And as for the left back, we've got 31-year-old Gulen, who I think so far is probably the best player on this list. I can't really see a weakness in his game other than finishing, but as a left back, I don't think you really need to have finishing. Still got pretty decent acceleration and pace, still got very good crossing and dribbling. His technique also really good, so he's an absolutely ideal wing back. Recently let go by Napoli, of course, but still played 14 times last season for them in Serie A. And again, I think another player that would still be very good in the top flight. Also, if you are enjoying this video right now, make sure you do drop a like, helps it push it out to more people in the algorithm, and make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, as we're on the road to 100,000 subscribers. points. Moving on to the second Algerian player in this list and the first of our centre midfielders, we've got Vydra, which I think I may have butchered as well. Apologies on the pronunciations, but this guy is a pretty solid centre midfielder who looks like he can do it all, if I'm honest with you. His physicals are really, really solid. Considering he's 30 years old, those physicals are still immense. The mentals aren't quite as high as the other players we've seen so far, but they're still very, very good in the sort of low to mid-teens, which I think you can be pretty impressed with. And of course, these technicals could be slightly better, but I think fundamentally is a good player. And actually looking across these technicals, he can play a whole load of different roles in the centre of midfield. He's probably a really decent ball-winning midfielder, can also play as a bit of a playmaker with some decent vision and passing, but also with a good work rate and teamwork, could be a nice box-to-boxer as well. So really quite a utility man in the centre of midfield, and in the centre of defensive midfield as well, can play a little bit further back too. Might want some big wages though, having just left a club in Saudi Arabia. Next up we have 28-year-old centre midfielder Felipe Augusto from Brazil. Another player who is recently playing over in Saudi Arabia as well, as you can see, but made most of his career out in Portugal. And again, I feel like this guy is a really, really balanced player who can do basically everything in the centre of midfield. There's no real standout attribute other than maybe his 15 free kick taking and 16 passing. He's a very, very good player across all areas, and because of that, you can play him in quite a lot of roles. But because of the 16 passing and 13 vision, I'd maybe have him potentially more as a playmaker. But at 28, still has a good few years ahead of him and would be a really decent squad player to have. Moving out onto the wings, and we're going to start taking a few risks with some of these players, starting off with 19-year-old Amadou Traore of Guinea-Bissau. Now this guy on the right-hand side, I'm seeing a lot of potential with him. His acceleration and pace is pretty good, will improve a little bit as well, and the crossing and dribbling of 11 and 14 at 19 years old is not bad at all. Couple that up with 14 first touch and 14 technique, you've got a player who's got a lot of raw ability. Now the technicals will improve as he gets older, but the fundamentals of really good determination, teamwork, vision, work rate, and off the ball, I think would make him a very solid player on that right-hand side. He's got a right foot only, so more of a winger as opposed to an inside forward or inverted winger, but I think would be really handy in your team and is versatile enough to play in a multitude of different positions across the midfield, as you can see. Was recently let go of Bordeaux, where he has actually made 20 appearances for the first team, which is pretty good. As for the winger on the other side of the pitch, let's go for Fabio Martin, a 28-year-old Portuguese player who actually looks really solid. Once again, the acceleration and pace are really good. Could be a little bit higher potentially, but you're not going to complain with 14 pace at all. Particularly when you've got 16 dribbling, that ball is going to be glued to his foot and can put a decent cross in the middle or take a decent shot. 12 finishing as well, so could play as a winger, inverted winger, or an inside forward, particularly on the left-hand side with only his right foot. A little bit more limited on the other side if he's only got a right foot, only limited to sort of a winger on that side of the pitch, but can play further back, including wing back as well, so is versatile enough to play in a multitude of different positions. Another player that might not be cheap though, recently playing out in the UAE, so his contract might be a little expensive. Now moving on to an attacking midfielder slash striker, can play in both positions. We've got Matej Vydra, who's been let go of Burnley recently, but was playing in the Premier League last season fairly frequently. Now looking across all of his attributes, he's a bit more of a jack of all trades as opposed to being a standout shadow striker, for example, or target forward. Maybe not quite tall enough to be a target forward, particularly with only 10 jumping reach. Finishing of 14 and composure of 11 makes him a decent striker, but not one that's going to get you 20 goals a season. He's definitely a man that you want to have in your team to add some squad depth more than anything else at that sort of top flight level. Potentially if you're dropping down to the second tier, actually he could be a really good starter. And actually his career does suggest that. Watford their 20 goals, Watford their 16 goals, Derby their 21 goals. You get to the Premier League and he barely scores any goals at all. So he's sort of a squad man, I reckon, but a decent squad man to have. And I mentioned at the start of the video that I might have a wonder kid on my hands for you. And we've got to him now. He's a 16-year-old striker who is a free agent, and I think actually fundamentally looks pretty good, and that is Yoris Manque, which I think I've butchered once again, but a 16-year-old French striker with really, really good fundamentals. Now, because he is 16 years old and not attached to any club, I do think that his current ability will be randomised, and potentially I've just got a really good randomisation of his attributes here. I also think that his potential ability is going to be completely up in the air as well. It's going to be in a potential ability range, so some save files it could be really good, some save files it could be really bad. But with a player who's 16 years old with 13 dribbling, 12 finishing and 13 first touch, I'd be all over that. The pace and acceleration of 13 as well is not too bad. Determination of 3 is quite low, I'll be honest, but that can be tutored out of him, particularly at 16 years old. He's got some pretty decent mentals as well to start things off, and his technique is not too bad. I think this guy, in the right circumstances, could be a genuine wonder kid. Also fairly tall, 188 centimeters, so actually could be pretty good in the air if you improve his jumping reach and his heading. But that is my list of 11 free agents that I think would be really good to sign up to your teams. Obviously, scout them out, get them on trial, and add them into your squad planner to see how they fit into your team. And if you want to know more about the squad planner and how to use it, there'll be a video on screen for you to watch right now. Get involved.